Hello YouTube, it's Hauntown here, and I'm delighted to say that Halloween is almost upon us. It is officially October, that month of the year when the veil between the world of the living and the realm of the dead grows thinner. When children and adults alike dress up as all manner of ghoulish creatures. It is the season when we celebrate everything creepy, spooky, and horrific. And one of the best ways to do that is to nestle by the fireplace with a mug of hot cocoa, wrap ourselves in our favorite blanket, and watch terrifying movies that will make our heart pound against our chest. I cannot overstate how much I love the Halloween season. I mean, as a longtime horror fan, it shouldn't come as a surprise, but I adore everything connected to All Hallows Eve. The scary costumes, the jack-o'-lanterns, the creepy ornaments, you name it, I love it. I've also been fortunate to have married a wonderful woman that adores the spooky season as much as I do. And every year we carve our pumpkins, dress up as murderous killers, and decorate our home in creepy and inventive ways. You know, normal couple stuff. Now, all that aside, one of our favorite Halloween traditions is doing horror movie marathons of both old and new films to get into the spine-chilling spirit of the season. And to give you a little help with that, I've taken the liberty of compiling a list of 9 wonderfully eerie horror films to properly set the tone for Halloween. Before we dive into the films, I do wish to clarify that not all of these movies actually take place during Halloween, but are rather incredibly creepy stories that will help put you in the mood for, you know, constantly looking over your shoulder as you do your best to keep a wary eye out for things that go bump in the night. I also wish to clarify that these aren't what I consider to be the best horror films of all time, but rather the ones that I personally believe truly fit the season. Finally, I won't be including any spoilers for these films, so you don't have to worry about that either. So, dear ghouls and gals, let's have a look at the 9 horror films that will completely immerse you in the unsettling ambience of All Hallows Eve. In my humble opinion, one of the creepiest things to have ever jumped out of the human mind is the doll, or really any derivative creation including marionettes, puppets, and my own personal nightmarish favorite, ventriloquist dummies. It's something about their dead, glassy eyes and the way they just sit limply wherever you leave them that truly makes the hair at the nape of my neck stand on edge, and as you would expect, I made it my life's work to find and watch as many horror films featuring dolls and dummies as I could. And it was during this journey that I came across this underappreciated gem. Released back in 2007, Dead Silence was born out of the twisted minds of James Wan and Leigh Whannell, the duo responsible for the Saw franchise, and was also their first non-Saw film following the initial 3 entries in the series. Dead Silence follows a man named Jamie Ashen, who is forced to return to his childhood home after the mysterious death of his wife in search of answers that will allow him to make sense of her passing. Soon he becomes entangled in the legend of an old ventriloquist who supposedly haunts the town, and it all goes downhill from there. Dead Silence does masterful work in terms of atmosphere and direction, and constantly keeps you guessing when it comes to every single character you'll get to meet. I truly enjoyed its twisting narrative, and I'm happy to say that I wasn't able to figure out exactly what was happening until everything was revealed in the final third of the film. This was one of the last movies to come out before the era of intense gore flicks took over, and largely relied on suspense and mystery to maintain interest, which is what I love about it. Thus, if you want to watch a horror film that keeps you guessing and doesn't rely on large doses of graphic violence to make you squirm, Dead Silence has you covered. Now, I understand that some of you may have kids and it might be a bit hard to find some free time to indulge with a good horror movie, but fear not, dear viewer. I, Hauntown, am here to provide a solution to your conundrum because this next horror movie is child appropriate, meaning that the whole family can sit back and enjoy the terrifying ordeals of its protagonist. I'm talking, of course, about Coraline, one of the most well-known children's horror novellas written by Neil Gaiman back in 2002, before being turned into a movie in 2009 by Henry Selick, the director responsible for a little-known movie called The Nightmare Before Christmas. The film follows 11-year-old Coraline Jones as she struggles to adapt to her new home after a recent move with her parents. Trying to find ways to occupy herself, Coraline goes exploring and eventually stumbles upon a small door that leads her to the other world, a place that seems to be a reflection of her world and is also home to doppelgangers of her parents, who have buttons instead of eyes. Everything starts off well and exciting for Coraline, but her fun soon turns to a fight for survival as she slowly realizes what the other world is all about. While the story actually goes to some dark places, what made Coraline truly creepy was the fact that it was made with stop-motion animation, which gave it an unsettling, clunky feel that truly worked wonders in combination with its Tim Burton-esque art style. I was immediately captivated by Coraline when I first watched it back in 2009, and I still find it to be a uniquely creepy experience to this day. If you ask anyone that knows me, they'll tell you that what I consider to be the perfect setting for an atmospheric horror film is a remote, snow-covered hamlet surrounded by thick, crooked woodland and home to wary and unwelcoming residents plagued by some sort of horrific malediction, either supernatural or man-made. And there's perhaps no better representation of this setting than Sleepy Hollow, a gothic horror film released in 1999, directed by Tim Burton and starring the ultimate legend that is Johnny Depp. Loosely based on a short story that was written in 1820 by author Washington Irving, the movie takes place in 1798 and follows New York City Police Constable Ichabod Crane, who is dispatched to the rustic hamlet of Sleepy Hollow in order to investigate a series of brutal murders that locals believe are being carried out by the undead apparition of a headless horseman. Featuring the distinctly dark style of direction Tim Burton is known for, Sleepy Hollow is drenched in rural horror magnificence, with its isolated setting doing an immaculate job of making you feel like the settlement itself is slowly constricting around Crane's neck like a noose as he races against time to figure out the mystery of this seemingly supernatural entity. Sleepy Hollow was one of the first horror films I ever watched as a child, and one of the most memorable ones, back when computer-generated visual effects hadn't yet taken complete control of the movie industry. If you want to watch an expertly directed horror mystery full of engagingly dark characters, you can't go wrong with this one. Hey there, parents! Didn't think I forgot about you already, did you? I know I've already given you Coraline, but I figured I'd bring another child-appropriate horror film into the fold, just so you can have choices when it comes to enjoying some good old-fashioned terror with your loved ones. This next one actually takes place during Halloween and features one of my favorite horror movie tropes, a haunted house. We're talking about none other than Monster House, an animated horror comedy film that came out back in 2006 and tells the story of 12-year-old Dustin James Walters and two of his friends as they try to figure out if something sinister is going on with their neighbor and his house, which appears to have a life of its own. Monster House is at the same time one of the creepiest as well as heartbreaking pieces of children's horror I have ever seen. I went into the film completely unaware of what it was about, since I just happened upon its DVD box in my local video rental store and thought it looked cool, and was completely blindsided by how well made and emotional its story ended up being, dealing with topics of rejection, ridicule, acceptance, and deep-rooted love in a truly magnificent and poignant way. Don't get me wrong, it still brings on the scares, but I just didn't expect it to go as deep as it actually did. Whether you're a child or an adult, Monster House will definitely captivate you with its visuals and creepy ambience, and will probably tug at your heartstrings a bit as well by its end. Back in Halloween of 2021, me and my wife went on a short trip to one of the most beautiful autumnal destinations in Greece, a small mountain village called Papigo. On our second day there, we were browsing Netflix in search of some new horror movies to check out, at which point our eyes fell on this cover. We figured that the premise of the movie sounded cool, so we decided to give it a go, and by God did I start beating myself over not having watched it earlier. Funnily enough, I had come across The Ritual back in 2017 when I first got my Netflix account. It was actually one of the initial Netflix originals to come to the service, but for whatever reason I never got around to watching it. The Ritual, which is based on the 2011 novel of the same name by Adam Neville, follows a group of 4 friends as they make a trip across a long hiking trail in northern Sweden in memory of another friend that died a year earlier during a robbery gone wrong. Following an accident that renders one of them unable to walk easily, they decide to take a shortcut through a vast expanse of woodland and soon realize that they may not be alone in these woods as something malevolent begins stalking them. It's hard to describe how excellent the cinematography of this film is, with brilliantly eerie shots of the sprawling landscape making the setting itself a character and reducing the protagonists to rats trying to escape something they cannot understand. The Ritual is one of the best examples of how to make a movie that starts slow but progressively escalates to horrific proportions, and is my second favorite horror film on this list, as well as one of my favorite horror films of all time. Trust me, just watch it. If there is one person in this world to whom I owe a huge debt of gratitude for fueling the fire of my love for horror, that's none other than Robert Lawrence Stein, the creator of my favorite children's horror book series, Goosebumps. While Goosebumps is without a doubt Stein's most well-known work, his twisted mind has also been responsible for the creation of several other book series, including Rotten School, Mostly Ghostly, Nightmare Hour, as well as his second most famous book series behind Goosebumps, Fear Street. Fear Street was Stein's move from children to teenage horror and featured darker and more violent stories that captivated readers across the world. Given its huge success, it was only a matter of time before a film studio turned its eyes on the property, and as expected, back in July of 2021 we were treated to a trilogy of films set within the Fear Street universe, which were released within a span of 3 weeks. As someone who has never read a Fear Street book, I didn't really know what to expect from these movies, so I went in with zero expectations and an open mind, and by the wisdom of the Dark Ones did I have the time of my life. The Fear Street trilogy transpires in the infamous town of Shadyside, dubbed the murder capital of the United States, and follows Dina Johnson as she tries to uncover the reason behind the series of murders that are taking place there, as well as the root of Shadyside's misfortune as a whole. Each film in the series transpires during a very different time frame and pays homage to diverse subgenres of horror, from classic slashers to supernatural horror all the way to rural terror. And the story is so incredibly well written and structured that it makes the whole thing feel like a bloody puzzle that you're slowly putting together until the final horrifying reveal. Even Stein himself talked about how impressed he was with these adaptations of his books, so if you have the thumbs up from the big guy, you know you're doing something right. Viewer beware, you are in for a scare. Now, this wouldn't be a proper recommendation list without a horror film actually dedicated to All Hallows Eve, and fortunately for you, I kept the best for last. Trick or Treat is by far my top horror anthology film of all time, which is a truly difficult feat to achieve. You see, anthology movies are essentially films comprised of interconnected short story segments that usually share a theme, and in most cases, at least one if not more of those stories are mediocre or, quite frequently, just plain bad. Not with Trick or Treat though. This horror beauty is comprised of 5 short horror stories and an overarching narrative that contextualizes them, and each one is a treat to behold, no pun intended. Released back in 2007, Trick or Treat takes place in the town of Warren Valley and follows a variety of different characters as they each go about experiencing the night of Halloween. But be careful, because not everything is as it seems, and as you would expect, everyone has something to hide. Trick or Treat manages to tell some truly compelling stories while maintaining a weirdly nostalgic sense of unease, and is another one of those films that doesn't rely on an overabundance of gore to scare you, though it does feature gore, mind you, but rather by permeating its world with a foreboding feeling of dread as you struggle to figure out who can and cannot be trusted. Trick or Treat was immediately embraced by fans of the horror genre and has since achieved a dedicated cult following of which I am a proud member. It should be noted that this movie was preceded by a short animation called Season's Greetings, which you can watch for free on YouTube and whose link I will include in the description below for those interested to see it. I honestly cannot recommend Trick or Treat enough, and if you're going to only watch one film to get you in the Halloween spirit, let this one be it. And thus concludes our little trip down my memory lane of horrors, ghouls and gals. If you've reached this final destination with me, I thank you kindly and would also like to know what are your recommendations for some awesomely creepy horror films to make the season a bit darker. Feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and remember to stay spooky!